Okay, so you could see this as an introduction to my video, which is why your university professor is a socialist, or you could see it as a test for my new microphone setup. Well, it's not actually my new microphone setup, it's my old microphone setup, because my new microphone setup has problems because someone's commented on the pop screen and now the pop screen doesn't work. So I've got my old one out and I'm going to try that one and see if the poppiness is better, because I was listening over to it and yeah, the popping was terrible. So I made a video response to the Scientists for EU a couple of months ago back now. Basically it was on the way that you can't just look at the input of the taxes that immigrants pay, you also have to look at how these taxes are actually spent. I got a couple of responses back privately through my Facebook account, and I've been trying to make a response back for a couple of weeks now. The way they've turned out has just not been great, and to be honest, I've not really been that interested in making the response because I've been getting comments like this, and I think I went over them in the first video. This one was basically that every single payer health system has had this problem in the past, that basically all the money goes to the middle classes. There seems to be nothing that we can do about this, as yet again this happens in every single country that has a single payer health system, and it has something to do with democracy, as your MP will not spend the money that they receive on who needs it, but rather on what will get them voted back in, which seems to be, if you love democracy, then you have to accept that the richer people will get a better service, as all around the world there is a link between the greater amount of money one earns correlates with the greater amount of percentage of one's earnings one is willing to spend on healthcare. There is no reason to suppose that their preferences will radically alter by national health insurance, and for us to reason to suppose that in allocating public spending, vote maximising politicians are doing anything other than responding to voters' preferences. But within this stream of comments, there was this one which got me really interested. So today, the video that I'm doing is a response to this singular comment. As this video is inspired by a comment from the Scientists for EU, I thought I'd do this video in the way of a scientific test, but I'm going to be a little bit rude and I'm not going to do a hypothesis. I'm just going to go straight into the background information and the method, and the reason I'm not going to do a hypothesis is that I just want to leave what I think until the conclusion at the end. Now, the background information is just a general look at the statistics of who voted for which party within the last general election that we just had this year, to get an understanding of basically who voted for who. Now, starting with working class and middle class, if we look at who voted for Labour and the Tories within the working class and middle classes, I think I'm safe in saying that this is the first election that the working class voted more for the Tories than for Labour, with 44% of the working class voting for the Conservatives compared to 42% that voted for Labour. I know this may seem like splitting hairs comparing 42% to 44%, but remember, if you said this 15 years ago that the working class of Britain would vote more for the Tories, you would have been laughed at and thrown in a mental asylum. This swing over to the Tories by the working class shows a discontent that is growing in the working class for socialism. Now, there doesn't seem to be a split between the working class and middle class anymore, at least in the way that there used to be, when it comes to which party to vote for. But I think it's fair to say that if you have two different perceived parties, which is certainly the case at the moment, you will most definitely have two different audiences. So what are they? Well, it seems to be between the public and private sector, where the Conservatives get more people voting for them in this field, being the private sector, than all the other parties combined. Where Labour thrashed the Conservatives in the way of getting voters is when it comes to the public sector. And when all the right and left-wing parties are combined, it creates an effect of the left-wing parties beating the right-wing ones by 58% to 42% in the public sector. So let's bring it back to the subject at hand. Why is your middle-class public sector employee, university professor, advocating for socialism? But before we do, we also need to talk about the way that students voted, with the majority of students overwhelmingly voting for Labour at 63%, with even the former Harper party, the Lib Dems, getting more than half of the votes that the Tories got. And when we group the left-wing parties and the right-wing parties up, we get a split of 80% for the left-wing parties and 20% for the right-wing parties. Now, the way to tackle inequality is with employment, so it's important to look at the employment ladder. If socialism is really beneficial to the people at the bottom, like is being suggested by the S4EU, and for equality, it would be aimed at benefiting the low-skilled and your public sector middle-class employee, university professor, who are located in the high-skilled employee fields, would accept this. The method is quite simple, as in order to achieve equality, you must put the needs of the less fortunate first. So the method is this: just to look at the policies of the left and see who they benefit and who they also disbenefit. Now, it's going to seem like I'm repeating myself here from previous videos which I've done, because I am, but it's such a big one it needs to be added in. So the Green Party and Labour wanted to increase the minimum wage from £7.20 per hour to £10 per hour. This is a massive increase of 39%, but who does this benefit? When the minimum wage goes up, an employer will decrease his or her shop floor staff and bring in either labour-saving equipment or more high-skilled staff. If you think of it like this, every single employee has a cost for his or her employer and a profit. A good employer will make it so that the profit is greater than the cost, to make the overall result be in the black rather than the red. It's a fraction with a profit at the top and cost at the bottom. When you increase the denominator of a fraction without increasing the bottom of that fraction, the overall result of the fraction decreases, making employing low-skilled staff less attractive to the employer. But it also makes automation more attractive, as automation isn't subject to any minimum wage laws, so will make the employer just as much net profit as before, which is now closer or even more than the low-skilled worker, because their net profit has decreased. When it comes to high-skilled workers, the denominator of the fraction does not increase, due to the fact that it was already above the new minimum wage, making employing them more lucrative, making it so more high-skilled workers get employed at the expense of the low-skilled workers, because the range between the cost and the profit for the low-skilled workers has decreased due to the increase in their denominator, but this hasn't happened with the high-skilled workers. For simplicity, let's add some numbers to the situation. Let's say a man owns a factory and he pays his low-skilled workforce £7.50 per hour and gets a return for their work of £15 per hour. He also employs some high-skilled workers at £20 per hour and receives a return of £40 per hour for their work that they have done. Each one, being low-skilled and high-skilled workers, gains him £1 in profit for every £1 he spends on their wages. Now someone in the government, some crazy man in office, wants to increase the minimum wage to £10 per hour from £7.20 per hour. This changes the situation for the factory owner. So let's do the sums again with this new minimum wage. Low-skilled workers will now cost him a minimum of £10 per hour and still only gain him £15 per hour. An increase, as increasing the minimum wage does not make his staff work harder. When it comes to the high skilled workers, the factory owner can still pay them £20 per hour, as their rate was already above this new minimum wage. Hence, the low skilled worker makes the factory owner 50p of profit for every pound he spends on the low skilled staff, where he gains £1 of profit for every pound he spends on the high skilled staff, just like before. For this reason, he will get rid of the low skilled and employ more high skilled. I'm always saying this, that you can't get rich off benefits. I have recently gotten employment in January, and because of this have been able to pay off my debts that came into existence after living in a homeless shelter. I wouldn't be able to do this without employment, and neither can the rest of the poor population. So who does this benefit and who does it harm? Wonder why your university professor is a socialist? Now on to the subject of immigration. I thought I mentioned immigration after the minimum wage because there are some comparables between the two. There are some differences but also some comparable issues. Now the Lib Dems support mass immigration, which can be seen with their constant support of the European Union and remaining part of the single market. The Green Party support immigration with statements like this, and Labour's statements from their manifesto, with a statement of ending freedom of movement but then strawmanning the arguments of mass immigration supporters. So a sort of one foot in, one foot out approach. And as I'm writing this script, Labour have flip-flopped again on the issue of the single market with a statement like this. When you allow mass amounts of immigration into a country, a different fraction takes place when it comes to the low-skilled workers. This time the nominator is the number of low-skilled jobs and the denominator is the number of people in the active working age population. When you increase the active working age population without increasing the number of low-skilled jobs, you decrease the percentage of low-skilled jobs available for the active working age population. This creates competition within the low-skilled field, which decreases the price of labour for the low-skilled, especially when this increase in the working age population is done by allowing mass amounts of people in who will work for less money, which can be seen with statements like this. Statements like this admit that migrant workers are willing to take less money. But what happens to automation and the high skilled? Well, I think it's clear to see that automation this time is less attractive due to the labour of the low skilled now costing less, decreasing the incentive of an employer purchasing automated machinery. When it comes to high skilled workers, more still get employed, as the employer has saved money on the low skilled workers. Just like with the minimum wage, an employer will place the money he saves back into his or her company, and as automation is less valuable, the high skilled option takes the predominant position. This would seem to explain why the market has been going on like this in the last few decades. Who benefits from this and who gets harmed by this policy? Wonder why your university professor is a socialist? Now I'm going to go through Labour's free education policy and also Labour and the Green Party's scrapping of the tuition fees. So now starting with a free further education. The last thing this benefits is the people in further education. When you put a cost on education or anything else, you place a barrier which acts like a sieve, sieving out all the undesirables. I have done another video on this where I use anecdotal evidence to show how this is the case. A lot of people who have been on job seekers for years have been on job seekers for years because they have made the choice to be on it for years. A lot of single mothers are single mothers out of choice. When you make further education free, you make it accessible for these individuals. There are more of these people at the bottom of the scale, as you don't get rich off benefits. It's not like these people are going to become true gentlemen and ladies as soon as they walk onto the college grounds. This policy does not help the working class whatsoever. Now on to scrapping tuition fees and this false equivocation between a bank loan and a student loan. With a student loan there is an annual threshold which If you fall under, you do not have to pay any of your student loan back. It's sort of like an additional tax, not a loan whatsoever, like what you would get from a bank. No one will start ringing you up if you can't pay it. No county court sheriffs will come displenishing any of your goods, and you will not end up living homeless. In fact, it doesn't even come under the definition of a loan being granting someone temporary use of something, as the recipient can have permanent use of the resources if he cannot afford to pay it back. How does this benefit the people at the bottom to have their taxes go up so that someone else doesn't have to pay for their resources that have been used to benefit their lives? Surely it's better that that person pays for the resources that they have used to benefit their life, and under a fair system, which we have. Now on to the famous 80,000 tax. This policy really shows what socialism is really about. How it's about the politicians taking the power of purchasing labour and the goods produced by labour off the people who have more of it than them. Seeing as this 80,000 a year is just slightly above what they get. But in order to tackle this problem, I would like to go a bit off key and start talking about Queen's Rugby Union Football Club.
Research in 2003 produced findings to delight the marketing managers, confirming long-held assumptions that rugby had a more prosperous following than even newly gentrified football. Premiership rugby fans were 61% professional and managerial, with 57% earning more than £30,000 per year. More than half of Harlequins fans were on £40,000 or more. Only Gloucester had a profile anywhere near football's 21% of fans were female.
Now the reason for this affluent crowd is rather than there being a rugby union cupid who fires arrows into people who get above a certain threshold in their pay grade, it is because they are going there to use the old boys connection to try and further their way up the employment ladder. This can be easily seen at Queen's Rugby Union Football Club Stadium with its function rooms and bars. This is the Undercroft Bar, which is built inside the DHL stand. And if you ever visit this ground and sit on the bottom rows of the DHL stand, you will find out that the building of this bar was more important than the vision of the pitch, as you cannot see the touchlines. But just think about how much employment these individuals create in their ambition to climb further up this employment ladder for the people below them, from the people manning the turnstiles, from the bar staff serving the drinks, from the stewards, from the cleaners, the groundsmen, the list goes on and on and on. These jobs wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the ambition of these people. If you decrease the incentive of climbing up that pyramid, then you are going to decrease the amount of people who want to climb up the pyramid, and as a result decreasing the amount of jobs for the people below them. In a capitalist society, what socialism advocates for and never achieves, capitalism sort of achieves for the people who want it and are willing to go out and get it. This can be seen by the following statements, as when you get further up the ladder, you have to spend more to make more money. Who benefits from this and who gets harmed by this policy? Wonder why your university professor is a socialist? So this is Labour's industrial strategy, which states,
our economy is suffering from years of neglect by governments that have refused to support workers. This wasted potential is holding us back. Inequality has ballooned as the economy has shifted towards low-paid and secure jobs.
Now what I get from this is that Labour are claiming that the job market has gone towards low-skilled jobs, as the low-skilled jobs are on lower pay, as you don't just do all this training to meet these requirements for less pay, even though the job market has done this. And with statements like this, they are going to focus on creating high-skilled jobs, even though the job market has done this. So yet again, it seems like another tactic to make up your own version of reality, which I also see being thrown around in universities, and then to bring in policies that will help these problems out in this work of fiction. But this would only help the people in the middle, and the people at the bottom would have to take another hit for the people who are better off than themselves. Now I could go on all day pointing out policies which have a result that panders towards the middle class at the expense of the poor people, but I think I've gone on long enough, and the policies which I picked were at the forefront of their campaigns. I want to go into the power of money and how this relates to socialism. What the power of money is the power to purchase labour, or the purchasing power to purchase the commodities that are being produced by people's labour. No more, no less. If you have money, the only power this gives you over people with less is the power to employ more labour than them, and the power to purchase more goods produced by other people's labour than them. Doesn't sound that scary when you put it like that. Now from Frederick Hayek. It is entirely fallacious to argue that the greater power exercised by a central planning board would be no greater than the power collectively exercised by a private board of directors. There is, in a competitive society, no one who can exercise even a fraction of the power which a socialist planning board would possess. To decentralise power is to reduce the absolute amount of power, and the competitive system is the only system designed to minimise the power exercised by man over man. Who can seriously doubt that the power which a millionaire, who may be my employer, has over me is very much less than which the smallest bureaucrat possesses, who wields the coercive power of testate, and on whose discretion it depends how I am allowed to live and work. This is most certainly true. If a millionaire wants to build a building and can't get planning permission, but still wants to build that building, then that millionaire must find willing bureaucrats who are corrupt in order to purchase the greater coercive power that that bureaucrat possesses. There is no way that that millionaire can just build a skyscraper without the help from the much more powerful bureaucrat. In other words, the bureaucrat has the millionaire bent over the barrel, even though the millionaire has more money than him. So what socialism is the more powerful bureaucrat with the greater coercive power taking the less powerful power of labour purchasing that the wealthy individuals possess, making the bureaucrat even more powerful. Now, the reason that your public sector middle class professor is advocating for socialism, well, I think Einstein sums it up in an article he did called Why Socialism? Man is at one and the same time a solitary being and a social being. As a solitary being, he attempts to protect his own interest and that of those who are closest to him, to satisfy his personal desires, and to develop his innate abilities. A politician is a person just like everybody else, and he or she will attempt to protect his or her own interests and that of those who are closest to them, to satisfy their personal desires and to develop their innate abilities. As this is the case, and the fact that your politician are middle class public sector workers, they will pander the system towards the middle class public sector workers. This is why your middle class uni professor is a socialist, because they are going to get fat from the overspill, from the socialist power grab. They are not doing it for equality, they are doing it for self-centred reasons. The bureaucrat will change the environment to suit the middle class public sector worker more if they have more power than if they have less.